Hey everybody, welcome back to Reaper Pro Tips. Sorry for the late start. This is your host, Anne, and we also have Disembodied Hands Quindy. Justin has been set adrift somewhere in the ether, but John is hopefully floating above us like a little Johnish guardian angel. But that's where we are today, folks. That's where we are today. I can imagine John as a guardian angel, can't you, Quindy? I mean, the beard's a bit much, but you know. I kind of feel like guardian angels are probably like the hard drinking partying version of the angel population anyway. Like with all they have to put up with, they have to put up with us. Come on. Like a little beardy cherub. Exactly. And now you all can't unsee that. Oh man, it's one of those days, folks. One of those days. All right. I was thinking about doing something really insane on this guy. I guess I have enough room to do it. But do I really want to do it? I don't know. I was thinking of doing some crazy like gold like brocade stuff on the orange. Like not with an outline, like just so it kind of blends in. But first we have to shade and highlight our orange to get there. So I am going to grab my components of orange. And did I keep a note on that? No, I was pretty sure that I would figure out how to do it. Sometimes Anne doesn't keep a note on a handy little card. Sometimes she's like, I can figure it out. So we'll see if I can. Best practice is not always adhered to in the world. This is what we've learned today. Let's see here. So I just want to be able to find my volcanic orange again. That would be handy. Alrighty. Man, I'm all over the place. I've been very bad lately about cleaning up my area after streams, and it's starting to really wear on me. So, yeah. There. All right. Excellent. A little better anyway. Y'all know that feeling when you haven't picked up your area for a while and then you go look at it and it's like a bomb of paint, brushes, and miniatures and tools has exploded in your area. And you lose all urge to work. Is that mood with anybody? There we go. Everybody's like, we're working. We aren't interacting with you. Paint. There we go. There. Now I'm a little bit better. A little bit better orged. Totally. Yeah, totally you, Quindy. Yeah, I got it. I got you. I'm there. Alrighty. I got excited about starting a new miniature for myself last night until I realized that I absolutely, had not even thought about basing, and unfortunately I'm not using the model's integral base, and so I need to think about basing before I can start painting, which is so frustrating. So now I need to find a plinth for her, because she's going to be competition level for sure, so I need to do it. I need to get on it. Miniatures Den with the huge raid. You would pick a day. Lukey, you always pick a day when, I'm working on something that's base coated. I'm sure it's because you're kind of wicked that way. But yes, folks, this is our wizard that we were working on. I was going to do the orange today. Yes, welcome, Paka Nation. Welcome. I'm Anne. I work for Reaper. We do stuff. It's that kind of day. Ah, dear me. Oh, you were doing Warhammer stuff, huh? Cool. But yes, folks, we do actually know how to paint on this stream. Despite all appearances. We were working on our cool centaur yesterday, and he's coming right along at this point. We're working on a kitty paladin. He's coming right along at this point as well. You know. There's proof. There's proof. But today we're going to work on orange, because orange is a color a lot of painters just kind of avoid. It can be problematic. The secret to base coating it, to getting a nice solid base coat, well, for one thing, you want to start just a level darker than you normally would start for a mid-tone. No matter if you're usually a person who applies washes or whatever, starting a level darker gives you the ability to use oxides, and those are really high coverage. So most of your reds, like Magma Red here for MSP, is a red with a lot of orange in it. And Sunrise Orange here is one of our more solid oranges as far as coverage. But when you mix those together, you can also add a drop of the Oxide Red. And the Oxides came out for Kickstarter from Bones 5. And they are pure pigments, so they're like the Chimera colors, and stuff like that. So we have Oxide Red, Oxide Brown, and Yellow Oxide. So Oxide Yellow, which of course are single pigment colors. And the oxides are earth tones. And they are very, very useful for adding coverage to colors. So when you're base coating yellow, for example, you can use some Oxide Yellow in there to increase your yellow coverage. And this is why I typically start just a little bit darker on yellows and oranges, because that lets me kind of add in this darker oxide color without really changing the color. What is he decreeing? I'm not sure yet. We have not decided. I am thinking about using some kind of Persian kind of designs on him. I'm not sure, maybe something kind of like Arabian Nights-y. I don't know. He kind of has that feel to me. Kind of a Middle Eastern Arabian Nights kind of wizard feel. So I have not yet decided what to actually put on the scroll. Like maybe levitate carpet. Rise rug. Arise rug. Something like that. I don't know. That would be kind of fun, though. That would be kind of fun. And then we could paint a little carpet, like, design on the scroll. I don't know. It has to be something, though, right? We've got all this room. All this vast amount of room on a 28 millimeter, which isn't very much room at all. I could freehand a meme on there, Gimli. You are absolutely on. I could do it. We did a spell on a previous wizard, and I haven't... when it comes around to the holidays this year, I'll paint the counterpart model for this. But I decided that with the rat familiar, the wizard here is actually casting Expel Cat. So, Expel Cat. And the mini that goes with this is the Reaper's model of the dragon cat stuck in the Christmas tree. So we will be doing that come the holiday season. We'll be building a little mini diorama. A very little mini diorama, but we'll do one. Because why not? No, I don't do likenesses, Valandar. The only likenesses I can actually draw are dogs. So I could do like a picture of somebody's dog, but I would rather do something, I don't know, a little more fun, because I just did a kitty cat. Given my kitty cat's a stick figure kitty cat, kind of, but Anyway, let's talk about orange. Let's get some highlights and shadows here on the orange. So we gotta ask ourselves if we're gonna go for like vibrant colors in our shadows, or if we're gonna go for more of a naturalistic shadow. I haven't done any shading really on these, except that I have used walnut brown, which is a black brown, to kind of mix some shadows and block in some shadows here on my parchment. That kind of argues that I should do the same thing with all my other shadows. I'm actually doing a PDF on this for my Patreon right now on how to mix good shadows for your colors if you don't want to just whip out a bottle of something darker. Anyway, one of those tactics is indeed to use a dark black brown, which typically gives you a gray, right? Mixed with any other color, or a darker version of the color, but something that's a little softer. If you look at your own hand, under normal indoor light anyway, sometimes even outdoor light, you'll see the shadows do tend to go gray. So mixing in something that will kind of give you that natural gray look, softer gray look, makes sense. I never use pure black, though, because you can get some weird stuff from that. I find it better to mix in a black brown. Something like walnut brown, brown liner, SS Camo black brown from Vallejo used to be my favorite. Stuff like that. Yeah, you too, Gimli. Thanks for hanging out. So I do tend to do that. The other thing we could do is we could use a complementary color to mute out this orange. So for a reddish orange, that means red, green, orange, blue, right? So we would use a blue-green, probably a dark blue-green, mixed in to this orange to take it darker. However, I do like to tend to decide on an overall way to do shadows and then to stick to it through the model. So since I have actually done the walnut brown with the scrolls, I'm going to actually mix my shadows with walnut brown for the rest of this piece. So I'm going to start out by mixing kind of a darker version. Well, maybe I'll hit that base color. So the base color is, I believe, about 1-to-1 sunrise to magma. It might be 3-to-1. We'll find out. I'm going to start out with 3 drops of the sunrise orange, since I was bad and I didn't make a note. But I know the magma red is really strong, so we'll go 3-to-1. Red tends to overpower yellow and orange, as you all know. The red has a very high dispersion, and yellow and orange are just weaker pigments in general. So even if there is a lot of pigment in the color, if you see a big shift when you add another color to a yellow, it doesn't mean that you don't have a lot of pigment in there. Yellow is just generally is going to give way before weaker colors. It's got a very fine pigment grind, and so stronger pigments with good dispersion are going to overwhelm it very quickly. So when you're mixing an orange, you may have noticed you only need a tiny bit of red added to a yellow to get there. And when you're trying to mix a dark orange, the same thing holds true. You want a very little red added to your orange first. You want to kind of ease toward it, or you're going to overwhelm it. Man, I can't do that late night stuff anymore. Yeah, I did do it too. Okay, well, there we go. So let's add in another drop of magma red. I want to get about where I was. I think that it's going to be about a 1-to-1, and then with a drop of oxide in there. So as you can see, just with our sunrise orange and magma red, we're still a little transparent, right? You can see through this a little bit. Like, you could get a good solid, I've thinned it, mind you. There is water in this. But you could still get a good solid base coat on this with just a couple layers. And that's kind of what we aim for, even with our transparent colors in MSP. Now, though, I'm going to add a drop of oxide, and this is going to instantly make it cover better. Hey, Kodiak, thanks for the resub. 4! You're counting up! Only 8 to go for your subiversary song. So I'm still trying to figure out how I'm going to set up my puppy cam, guys. I'm kind of thinking maybe an X pen, an exercise pen. I need to order one. And see what I can do. I need to make a little puppy enclosure. I need a puppy playpen is what I need. Something to keep a puppy confined while still giving you guys a good view. You have to have a view of the cute. Although I don't know why I'm striving to do that, because honestly, it just means you're going to watch the puppy all day and not me. But, you know, oh well. I'll take it. For increased viewership, I'll take it. Twisted Oma, Quindy and I talked about this morning, and they're kind of not wanting to really publicize stuff like that yet. They'll make an official announcement when they're ready. But they're still exhausted. Newborn syndrome. So after the oxide, see how much more solid that is? Even when I'm pushing it, you can still see that it covers better than this. So that's a lot of coverage for just 1 drop of paint, considering there are already like 6 drops of paint in there. And there's even water in there. So you can see how much that coverage improves just from the addition of 1 drop of oxide red. Oxide red is good to add to oranges and to reds. For reddish browns, you can also get away with it, but most reddish browns cover great because they're built with this pigment. So, but yeah, but for orangey browns, like maybe harvest brown, if you wanted to maybe get a little bit more coverage with just a little bit of color shift, you could add a drop of this. You could also add a drop of oxide brown, either one. They would shift the color slightly in a different way. Next month, I realized I still had to do my Mixing Your Own Shadows PDF this month for the Patreon, but next month for the $5 tier, I'm going to talk about different colors of brown, and we'll talk about the oxides there, and it should be a nice little reference for you guys who are on my Patreon. That's patreon.com/paintingbig. And thank you to everybody. I know there are a lot of people on this stream who are patrons. I really, really appreciate you. You guys keep me going, literally keep me going, lifting me along with your little digital hands in my life. So like all the cred to you, really. All right, so now let's mix a shadow. I'm going to stick to my walnut because that's where I was. I've got a nice big pool of this color now, so I can take my mixing brush and grab 2 big brushfuls. And I am going to put just I'm not going to do a full drop of walnut. If you want, what you can do for this, if you're on a wet palette, it's super easy, right? You just put down some walnut and you just add a tiny bit. But you can do that with this palette too. Just mix a separate puddle that's quite small, and then you can add just a little bit via brushful. I tend to do like what I call a half drops, so I'll squeeze a little bit out, and then I'll just do that. But if I need even less than that, then I'm going to mix up a separate well of that color. So see how much that pushes that color down. And what do we get? We actually get a pretty nice brown. Now, if we had gone with pure black, we would see a different shift. We would see a shift toward green. Because I don't think the oxide is strong enough in here to counter the yellow. These colors have a lot of yellow in them. I think we'd get more of a greenish hint. That's why I don't use pure black. Walnut brown has oxide pigments in it to help fight that greenish hue that you get. So that's why I like to use it, and I don't like using black. We actually get a very nice rich brown. This is actually a pretty nice color, as you guys can see. It doesn't suck. But yeah, you're seeing it pretty well too. Yeah, there you go. So... No, there's not blue in the black. It's actually just black and yellow war shadow. I actually did a whole show on this. If you go back and watch, and maybe Quindy can find it, but when we were choosing an olive tone for Centaur, I did an entire stream on how to mix your own olive greens using black and yellow. And it's not because there is any blue pigment in the black. It's the way that black and yellow interact. And now given the coal black that many people, most miniatures companies use for black, does have a cold shift to it, but there's no actual blue in the color. And this is why you never want to put a black wash over yellow, because you're going to get, yeah, there you go, Quindy. There are certain pigment interactions, war shadow, that are counterintuitive. And it's just the way the pigments play. And another one is mixing phthalocyanine green with magenta. You can get blue. You can mix green and magenta and get blue. It's a thing. It happens. I've used it to good effect in past streams. I don't think I've got clear... Do I have clear magenta? Yeah, I do. All right. So just to show you that this is a real thing and not that I'm hallucinating. It doesn't make a very good blue. Like, it makes kind of a transient blue, to be honest. Let's use Tianzia Jade, which is very close to a phthalocyanine. Uh-oh. Unfortunately, my Tianzia Jade is very much grumpy because I haven't used it for a while. So I need to reshake it up. Got a lot of binder, a lot of clear fluid in that first drop, so I'm going to redo it. Well, coal black, well, okay, that's different. That's different. Okay, Crows and Bones. Coal black is a totally different color. That is not a pure pigment. Lamp black is probably a better term for the actual pigment of black that we use. Though it is also called coal black, and it depends. But lamp black, which is carbon black, is the pigment. Coal black, the paint you're thinking of, is not a pure pigment. It's a black with a green and blue mixed in. So totally different, not the same thing. I'm talking pigment names rather than paint names. Tianzia Jade is, yeah, it is a good green. So now let's throw some magenta in there, and we'll see how fast I can get this to shift. Here we go. So then right away we're purple. Let's put a little bit more Tianzia in it. It's okay. I should have clarified. I usually use lamp black, but today I defaulted to the incorrect name. And we'll just continue adding some green. Oh, we're going to need to add, but you can see it going colder. Bloop, bloop. I'm going to load it on. Tianzia has a lot of pigment, but it's fairly phantom, so. Oh, look. What do we have? We've got blue. Amazing. So, green and red make blue, just so y'all know. This is why, actually, if you use certain purples to create shadows for certain greens, you'll get a blue shadow. Yep. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, for sure, bots. And it's the same, it's actually the same kind of thing, bots. You can get many of this, and it depends on the pigments now, because if you're using oils, you might actually, if you're using artist oils, you might actually have access to pigments that we can't use in acrylic mixing. So there are variances, and for sure, and there are interactions I wish I could get that I can't get because I'm using, when I was making Master Series paint, there were pigments that I just couldn't get that are essentially artist pigments that are very expensive that we would never use in hobby paint making. So but yes, and you can get some of those same reactions by glazing with regular acrylics. So like if you laid down something and then you put a glaze over it, you won't get it as intensely as with an oil glaze because of the transparency is lacking, and you're looking for opacity with acrylics usually. So that is going to kind of give you a weaker result, right? But you can still achieve some of those interesting things. It's a pretty blue, but it's a really, really you can't mix it with anything except white or black. Yeah. I mean, a lot of hobby paints are loaded with pigment too. It's just that you're limited by what base you're using in hobby paint. To be very honest with you. Yeah, it's what base you're using, and that'll influence it, because there comes a point with every and by paint base I mean the actual like water plus resin mix that you're adding your pigment to. But there comes a point where if you add too much pigment, your paint won't actually dry. And so, depending on the base you're using, that actually is a hard cutoff limit on how much pigment you can load into a water-based paint. Because when you overwhelm that threshold, you don't get adhesion anymore. And if you go close to it, it can weaken your adhesion. Oh, I love undercoating in acrylics anyway. Like, I like underpainting is kind of my thing, bots, so I totally like that. But yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it is expensive, though, for really good ones. Yeah, I made the Master Series paint line. I did, I learned just enough paint chemistry to kind of make myself dangerous, bots. So, I know acrylic stuff very well, but oil stuff, I never got into solvents or anything like that. So, that's a little bit more of an alien world for me. But anyway, back to our happy little mixed brown. So, you would never think that if you mixed these two colors, or these two colors, these three colors rather, you would get a beautiful light orangey brown like this, but you do. So yay. So experiment, guys. You'd be surprised. The key is to mix as little bit of walnut in, just a tiny bit. Because the black in the walnut still has a heavy load of black along with its oxides, and it will get overwhelming pretty quickly. So you want to be pretty like tiny with your walnut additions when you're mixing natural shadows. So I'm going to add a little bit more water to this because I want to be able to blend it with layering. But yeah, when I was first learning paint mixing, bots, and I was first developing the first Master Series colors, I actually did tests. I had the time at that point because we were in R&D mode, and that took about 6 months. But I did tests as to how much pigment I could overload into certain bases before they would essentially scrub off with a coat of water and some pressure. So I was able to kind of locate each of the main bases we were using. I was able to locate kind of their hard pigment cap and put a note not to go above that when I was doing formulations. Now, oils are very different, and I'm not sure, because oils evaporate, right? Like, they fix as they evaporate, from my understanding. Like the water in, or it's the way it was explained on an art site when I was reading the other day. So it takes a long time for all that solvent or all that the base, I guess, the oil base, to harden over time. So I'm not sure about the mechanics of that as far as overloading, as I haven't ever experimented with it. I kind of assume there's a ceiling somewhere. But the bottom line is you just can't keep adding pigments, much as everybody is like sold on this idea that more pigment is better. You can't just like, more pigment, there does come a point where more pigment is not better. It hurts your paint. Or at least it will keep it from sticking to minis. Oh, yeah. Yeah, bots. I mean, when I go on vacation, I usually I'll bring 20 colors with me. I can mix everything. I can mix the entire line with 12. But, like, everything in Master Series, I can mix it by hand with 12 tubes, 12 bottles. But, yeah, most people in miniatures, at least over here in America, I know, we get into it like as a, through like hobby, like on gaming and stuff. A lot of people don't have anything close to an art background. And so these people really, really enjoy being able to just reach for a bottle. And at this point, I do too. Like, the reason I tend to take 20 colors with me instead of the 12 is just that there are some colors that are very, very hard to hit because they only have a tiny speck of X or Y, but it makes a difference. So I do, like, there are certain colors that I know are a pain to mix that I'm just not going to mix by hand. But yeah. But yeah, I think that the preponderance of having more colors is because I know in talking to people on my Patreon and at conventions, people aren't as comfortable with mixing. Now, I will say that as usage of the wet palette has risen, that mindset is starting to fade a little. Like, we still get people who are brand new to the hobby who are not comfortable with mixing. But people who embrace the wet palette tend to learn to mix just because it's kind of just part and parcel, right? Like, you tend to kind of start to mix and you do little bits and then you get more comfortable with it and so on. So I do feel like the wet palette, that's one of the advantages of the wet palette, is it makes it very easy to mix and it can create a very intuitive feel for mixing for you if you use one. So I'm just like putting in some shadows here with my brown. Yeah, it's fast and easy, but it's what I usually tell people when they start, like when they're brand new, if they've got no art background whatsoever, I'll tell them to try both palettes. The reason I do that, bots, is that in my own painting, I found that it was a lot easier for me to get a handle on paint consistency when I was using the well. Because I could dial in my paint consistency and then have it be consistent for half an hour, 45 minutes. Depends on your climate. If you're really arid, maybe only 20 minutes. But it'll stay wet for the stream. And it'll stay at the same consistency for half an hour, 45 minutes. So what that let me do is really experiment with different paint consistencies until I got an intuitive grasp of them. Now I'm able to use a wet palette and pretty much mix my consistency on the fly, brush by brush, just like, a lot of very experienced wet palette users do. But I have noticed that many new painters, if they jump straight into the wet palette, can struggle with paint consistency because it's always slightly variable. And if you keep at it and you really like the wet palette otherwise, you'll eventually get there. But if you want to understand paint consistency a little faster, you can cut corners by going to your well, playing around, learning like what it feels like when it's a one-to-one mix and what it's like when you need X or Y or a glazing mix. And it'll help you a little bit kind of internalize what you need. That's been my experience. This is a ceramic well. It's a porcelain well, bots, and it's from a company called Cheap Joe's Art Supplies. They just had a sale, so they may be sold out. It's a 28 well. The reason I like this for mini painting specifically is that you can see how small it is. My fingers are not huge, and it's a much smaller well, right, than we are used to getting in miniature painting. And that enables me to mix a color and have much less surface area exposed to the air and a deeper puddle. And that is what makes the paint stay the right consistency for longer. That and adding water, of course. So my average paint, I forgot to add water to the blue. My average paint mix is probably 6 to 8 drops of paint plus water, and that'll keep it pretty good for at least a half an hour. 8 drops if I want it to be really stable for a half an hour to 45 minutes. If I make a really big puddle, like I made with this blue accidentally, I can get this sucker to stay good for an hour, hour and a half. Like, the more depth you have, the longer, obviously, it'll take to evaporate, so it stays at the right consistency. Yeah, I'm kind of an analytical strategy, like very step by step kind of regimented painter, I guess. I don't know. It's just the way I think. So I'm not so much an intuitive painter in most cases. So I really like to break down why things work for me, which I think is kind of good. Like what I'm explaining, obviously, I can give you the actual reasons why this works, i.e., like, you know, the depth to surface area ratio makes evaporation go slower. Um, you know, so I really enjoy like kind of getting granular on stuff like that. But it does limit me as an intuitive painter unless I can convince myself to just get crazy. Which on occasion I do, but I don't enjoy it as much. All right, so I'm just going to shade. You can kind of see, just when you put it up like next to the light, you can see that I've got some shadows here to put in. You can also see my orange isn't terribly solid, so I think I'm going to actually put another coat on this. Oh yeah, definitely, for sure. Oh, that's good to know, Crows. Yeah, I didn't know Richardson did a smaller. But if it's got smaller wells, then it'll serve the same purpose as this one. The most important part is that the wells are smaller and not the big, huge wells that you typically see from like those big flower palettes. Just gonna get a new coat on here. Make it a little more solid. But yeah, the important part is just that you have a small surface area compared to the depth. You don't want a big, wide well because that's going to give you a lot of surface area, which means evaporation is going to go faster. Now, I do need to shade. This hat is really, really overshadowing. We're not going to get much bright orange on this hat, except like right up here near his face where it's tilting upward. Otherwise, a lot of this hat needs to be shaded. So I need to grab my brown and block that in. And you can just see that when you actually focus toward the light, you can see that you can see the shadow falling on the back here and a brighter light here. So that's what we're just mimicking. A lot of the time with shadows and highlights, for people who are brand new and they just don't know, they're just like, I'm not sure I'm putting the shadows in the right place. Really just get yourself one light source and just keep comparing. Look at your mini, look at the light source, and paint what you see. And even if you aren't perfect in doing that, you're still going to find that it sets you up for success. It does mean that if I do a brocade pattern on this orange, I won't be doing it up on the hat here. The hat will just be itself. So a lot of darkening shadow there. Yeah, for sure, Daffodweir. Yeah, climate will definitely. And you know, oh nice, yeah. If I was, when I painted Santa Fe, which is higher temperature and really, really low humidity because high desert, I essentially just use more paint and I make deeper puddles. And that compensates. The additional fluid that I can add at that point compensates for. And if you're worried about wasting paint, just get some saran wrap and put, the way I save my palette is Rhonda uses a damp sponge, I think, to lay over the top of the wells that she's using. But I actually just put like a few drops, like with my water here, I'll just put a drop or two in the wells around the colors I'm using and then saran wrap the whole thing. Just cling wrap it. And that'll keep it good for 1 to 2 days, which is usually, if I'm saving a palette, I'm probably going to get back to it the next day or the next day after. So that's essentially enough for me. I tend not to leave paints sitting on my palette for a lot longer than that. And I tend to like to work with fresh paint too, so I don't want my paint to like be sitting around for forever. That's true even with my wet palette, the few times I use it. Alrighty. So I am going to go vertical at first with these shadows. Usually I'd be doing a layering stroke, but I kind of want to block in just kind of a subtle effect first. and then I'll feather in the edges. The reason you don't normally want to use a vertical stroke here is that when you've got long, thin things like these folds and you use a vertical paint stroke, the eye is immediately going to pick up all your brush strokes. Like the human eye loves to draw comparisons. And so if it sees a vertical edge of paint and it sees a vertical fold of cloth, it's going to pick up on that super fast. So that's why when I get down to it, I'm going to use actually a crosswise stroke to blend in that edge and fool the eye. You're fooling the eye. You're trying to get it to not notice your clever little brush strokes here, and you want it to really just see a natural shadow. So, also if you're doing cloth texture, usually that horizontal stroke gives you a convincing cloth texture because it's what would pick up with the light falling from above. And this is true on highlights even more than shadows, but I tend to best practice, I tend to use the same no matter what I'm doing, highlight or shadow. So I still have a pretty hard edge on that one side. I can see it, so I'm gonna work on that a little extra. And I'll probably come back with my orange into it as well once I break up this edge. Also, I've got a little bit much paint on my brush, but that's all right. If you go a little too heavy and you get a really dark fold, first let it dry. Remember that all acrylic paint that's been thinned is probably going to dry darker than it looks. But you can always glaze over it. Yeah, I don't bother with, I don't really care about wasting paint either. I mean, there's so many drops in each of these bottles. It takes me so long to go through one anyway. Although I am almost done with my, I can tell I really like Asmodeus Red from the Pathfinder range because I'm really almost done with one bottle of it already. I use it for a lot of streams though, and with the streams I definitely am cleaning my palette off after every one. So I got a little heavy-handed here and I can see my marks, so I'm going to take my orange. You can do a reverse layer, which essentially you're just taking the orange, which is the outside color, and you're painting it over the brown. Now the orange is a lot more see-through than the brown, so you may need a couple of layers to get that to fade nicely. It depends on how much texture you want to leave though. If you're trying to leave a little bit of cloth texture, then you don't have to worry about being able to see your brush strokes a bit, because you're going to want that. But I haven't decided how much texture I want to put on this. I may not want much texture because I'm thinking about doing freehand on this orange. A pretty elaborate freehand too. It's been a while since I've done some really elaborate stuff. And I want to do a brocade on the model I'm starting for myself, given that's 75 millimeter, but you know, a little extra practice on the fine motor coordination never hurts before I start that monster. Might do a Patreon thing on it for my $10 tier. So I was looking up cool brocades. And 75 millimeters, probably the smallest that I'd want to try to do a brocade on. You can, I mean, do really fine detail. I mean, Jessica Rich and Marika Reimer and Kat Martin have all proven that you can do super fine textures on 28 millimeter and have them look amazing. It's just really hard, and the majority of people won't have the fine motor for it. Limbo, it's the Limbo Priestess model. So, 1 second, let me see. Limbo. Let's see if I can find her. I can never remember her name, but I'm sure I'll find it. Do. Why can I never remember the name of this model? And why is she not at the top? She ought to be awesome. Oh, Yakun. Yeah, this one. Hold on. Now I can find my search. Do do do. This one. That model. I've got the 75 version. I've wanted to paint it forever. But it came with a little broken, one of her little fleur-de-lis on her staff was broken, so I had to resculpt it. Took me a while. Because it's a tiny little thing. There we go. So we've mostly blended that in at this point. But that is my new model for me, since I finished the Halfling Assassin. And since I'm mostly doing my Wolfen on stream on Saturdays. Oh, I finished the turtle too. That's it. I finished my Bard Song, Turtle Druids, so that enables me to start a new mini. I think I need a little more brown deep in this fold, though. Now, when I get down to the bottom of a fold, if I've missed the shadow, I will kind of stipple just to have it blend into the lines on either side. Didn't quite get that dark enough. You can still see that it's more orange than brown. But yeah, I loved my Limbo models. Like that of all of the Kickstarters that I picked up in the years of the pandemic, that Limbo Eternal War Kickstarter, still the models from that still make me excited every time I look at them. I just love the style. And I got a little bit outside of the fold there. So yeah, I'm thinking about basing for her. David wants me to put her in a ruined cathedral, but I'm thinking about, I don't know. I'm thinking about stuff. I'm trying to figure out what I want to do. My original concept was a kind of a cathedral or a ruined one, but I realized with me wanting to do excessive freehand on her cloth, I couldn't put her in a backdrop. That's the problem. If you're going to do freehand on the back of a model, you can't give her a backdrop or nobody's ever going to see it. So since I want to do freehand, crazy freehand, because I like it, I've got to put less of a... I can't put things way up behind her or it'll just totally block everything. So either I have to put something behind her that's lower, or I have to dispense with having something behind her and do something else. Do a different idea. So I'm going pretty subtle with this orange. Like, I'm not trying to overwhelm the surface. Remember, this is a surface control question. You've got this brown. If your brown gets too wide and takes up too much of the surface, then your cape's going to start to look brown. So you don't want that. Now, I do need some shadow to come up right under this hem that overhangs this area as well, because there would be a shadow there where it overhangs. So by painting that in, because the problem with 28mm, guys, is that it doesn't cast natural shadows. This scale, that's why we have to overemphasize everything and why we have to actually paint in shadows where they would normally be. And doing that, just painting in that little bit of shadow, you can see how much more realistic that looks, right? The cloth actually looks like it's casting a shadow. It looks like it has weight all of a sudden, instead of just kind of being there. And that's what we're going for. Now, she comes with a base with a design that I like. It's not a rose, and I don't want to go rose with her. That's actually not. If I'm going to do anything, and this is a philosophy of my own, Crowley, but it's something to consider. If you are going to do a base for a model like this, look at the model's actual iconography and see if you can come up with something that works off of the existing iconography. Doing that will give your model more of a sense of place, and it'll give it more consistency, coherency to the storyline to echo its iconography. On the other hand, you can go the other direction and put it into something that is definitely opposite of its iconography. So instead of the little angel armor plates on her hips, I could do something that's very demonic, thus putting her in the lair of the enemy, right? So you could go either way, what you're looking for is emotional resonance. You're looking for the mood of the figure. If you're going to do a base, don't just do a base. Think about the mood of the figure. Where is she? What's the story? What's she doing? Is she in a friendly zone or is she in an unfriendly zone? I tend not to go for pretty these days. I tend to go for story and then go for pretty after that. I'd always rather, if I'm going to go through the trouble of building a big base for a figure, and for me it is trouble, I don't enjoy it that much, then David, on the other hand, enjoys it a little too much. Ask me why I say so when he's been sitting there hand building a wall out of tiny bricks. I couldn't. I just can't. But yeah, so... yeah, you can do that if you want, Gibson. But since many of you do enter ReaperCon, and many of you think about entering Diorama, just a little note. Story. Think about story. There are times I get an idea for a base, and then I go looking for a model that makes sense on it. Because I'd rather look at the model and have it tell me what base it should be on than trying to impinge an idea onto it. That's why I'm kind of waiting for her to tell me who she is and what she's doing. I already know what colors I'm painting her. That's easy. For me, that's the easy part. But it's the story that I want to tell. That was the case with, you guys remember the Halfling Assassin, where I definitely was out to tell a story with that figure. I think that 75mm models in particular, because they're bigger, you can do a lot of techniques on them, but they're also, like, they're big enough, they're in a place, right? You're dealing with a full model, you're not just painting a bust. So it's easier to give them that sense of place and to tell a story with them. And I think that's why I like to do that, because the Halfling Assassin was also a 75mm. She was just a halfling, so she wasn't actually 75mm tall. So how smooth you want your blends and how nice you want it to look is all a matter of futzing. As you've all watched me talk to you and sit here and futz with these blends just to get them nice and smooth, and they're still actually not smooth. That's like the only difference between a fast and serviceable paint job and a competition level paint job for me. How much futzing am I going to do? How much fixing am I going to do? How much eliminating or reducing flaws am I going to do? That's really the only difference for me. I paint a model, and how much time I spend on that model determines whether it's worthy of a competition or not. That's cool, Gibson. Oh, David, yeah. Yeah, David has been hand building his griffin enclosure, as I call it. He got a griffin that he really adores with a griffin rider on it. And he has been building a griffin enclosure. It's gonna look amazing. And the plumbing is intact. He's actually building drainage pipes. Like, oh my god. Like, it's gonna be amazing. Don't get me wrong, but could I do this? No, absolutely could I not do this. Like, I would not concern myself with having adequate drainage in my griffin enclosure. Maybe that's just a personal fault of mine. It's like, it's amazing, but oh my god. Like, David he tops out. Like, there's a reason the man is a Best in Show winner. There's a reason he's got a crystal brush. Like, you just let him at a scenic base, and he'll figure out how to do it, and he'll figure out how to do it amazingly, even if it takes a crap ton of work, and then he'll put the work in. At least he will if the model continues to excite him. Just like the rest of us, David is prone to, like, starting a model and then kind of, like, petering off on it if it's not quite working out. We all have that kind of thing going on, right? All right, so we've got some shadows on here. I need to put a little bit of shadow up here as well. And then we need highlight. But, like, yeah, I can't do that. Like, I get very impatient with basing. And sometimes I get a little lost in it. I'm just like, is this really necessary? Is this trip really necessary? I like models with integral bases that I can dress up better than trying to scratch build my own stuff. Where some people just love to scratch build their bases. Like, that's kind of what gets them in their groove. And I like putting a model in a scene, but I'd rather start working from a base that's kind of pre-prepped and then work more personality into that base than to do a whole base from scratch. Because I'd rather be painting the model. Like, it always comes down to that. I'd rather be painting. Yeah, when stuff just isn't working that great and you're just like, meh. That's a thing. Every painter hits it. Every painter does. And sometimes you gotta ask yourself, like, I've actually learned to do this with my writing, and it was very valuable. And it kind of depends, too, on the kind of person you are. Like, the way your brain moves. If you tend to, like, overthink and really get into, like, thinking about a project, be aware that sometimes it's just that your brain is, like, bored. Like, learning that was the biggest, most freeing thing for me. When I realized that I wasn't having trouble finishing working on my book because there was something wrong with the book. It was just that I was bored. And that was like a huge weight off me. And once I realized it, I was able to just say, oh, come on, brain, let's go and work on it. Because, I could just treat my brain like a little kid, like the bored little kid it is. So like ask yourself, some questions when you run into that. Is it really that it's that hard? Is it really that things aren't turning out well? Or is it just that you're kind of bored? Because it happens, right? And because it's our hobby and we should enjoy it, right? We want to enjoy it. Sometimes it's like, if we get bored, we get bored. Sometimes you put the project aside for a while. If it's something you've committed to doing, then you're stuck. I'm going to mix up some more orange, guys, so I can make a highlight. 1, 2, 3. But be aware that's a thing. Like, it isn't always that there's something wrong with the project. It could be just that, you're bored. Especially if it's a big involved thing that you spent a lot of time planning and it's taken you a lot of time to, like, start executing it. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of kind of I told you guys I was taking that Clifton Strengths personality test thing, which is supposed to identify your strengths, but it also identifies, like, common weaknesses for your brain, the way you think. And one of my things definitely is that I spend a lot of time thinking on things, and I need a lot of time to really develop ideas. And that was another freeing thing, right? Because, like, so much of our culture is like, get it done fast, and we admire people who paint quickly, don't we? And we're kind of taught that painting slowly is a liability. But for some people, it is not a liability. For some of us, it's just the way our brain works. So learning that, if you're the kind of person who does a lot of introspection and a lot of deep thinking, and that somebody who tends to have to mull over things to arrive at the best conclusion, like, be aware that it's not, like, don't get down on yourself for being slow. Sometimes it's just what you need. And the results are going to be better if you give yourself that time than if you try to rush. All right, let's mix a highlight. 2 big blobs of paint. And that's a thing too, Nomad Zeke. That's a brain type also. Where, your forte is not to sit and concentrate on something for long periods of time. So, like, the best thing for you might be to just dedicate 20 minutes a day to painting. Because you've got a brain span of squirrel, right? So play with that. Like, make it a strength of yours. Your strength when you've got a limited attention span is that you can bounce back and forth without a lot of disruption, right? You're used to doing it. So that can be a thing for you. Just keep your painting set up, your model and the paints you're using and your palette and your water set up on your brush, set up on a tray, stuff the tray somewhere. And when it's time to paint, just whip out the tray and start. And just spend your 20 minutes until you get distracted. Don't get down on yourself when you get distracted. Just say, cool, I finished some stuff tonight. And put it back. And throw your camera out of whack. And put it back and get on with your life. Yeah. A lot of people aren't army painters, Babel. Like, the only way I could ever paint an army is if I was just concentrating on it, one character and, like, a few people at a time. It would take me forever. It would look beautiful at the end. I have been tempted to do that. Let's see. What do I want to do for a highlight? Now, I just talked about using, like, kind of lighter... Do I want yellow? I don't know if I want yellow. You know what? As Anne stops and thinks about what she wants to use. I'm going to use sun yellow, but I'm going to use some white also. Yeah, wasn't that nice, Quindy? The whole, like, camera swing. I'm very exuberant when I'm passionate about something. But yeah, so really, like, it's all about, like, the more I get into this whole thinking about, like, playing to your strengths kind of thing, the more it makes sense to me. So play to your strengths. Don't get down on yourself because you're not painting like everybody else is telling you should. It's just like Rhonda just put out that blog post on Bird with a Brush that improvement is not mandatory. She's absolutely correct. Like, don't get down on yourself. Like, improvement is cool if you want it. But if you just want to paint, just do it. And don't have anybody tell you that you should be learning this or you need to learn that. Like, learning X or Y may help you if you're struggling with something. So that's something to remember. Yeah, improvement is not mandatory. Go read the blog post. Rhonda has excellent points. She always does. I feel in a lot of ways like Rhonda's Patreon and my Patreon are a really good match for each other. Like, I feel like we believe a lot of the same thing and we communicate similar concepts in different ways, which is really valuable, I think, when you're learning. So much endorse Rhonda's blog. She also does Ko-Fi or Coffee, however you say that, for tips. And she also does a Patreon if you want to throw her a couple bucks a month to help offset the cost of all the hours she spends doing all those incredible PDFs. So, yeah, total endorsement of Rhonda. Rhonda's awesome. And improvement is not mandatory. I had a couple people who had come to Paint Club. And back in the day, I was kind of like, what the heck? But then as I, just got to know them and just, like, hung out with them, I got it. They weren't there to improve. They weren't there to learn. They were there to learn a new technique if they were struggling with something on a miniature. But they weren't out there going, I'm going to get better with every miniature, or I'm painting and I want to learn this technique next, and just because I want to learn it next to get to be a better painter. They were painting because they loved painting, and they didn't really care if they improved or not. They just enjoyed the process, and if the model looked cool in their eyes afterwards, then awesome. That was all they needed. Like, that was their hobby, and it is valid, folks, to do that. I mean, I love all y'all who are trying to improve, because that's the kind of person I am. I always strive to, like, get better just because it's rewarding to me to learn new things. That's just kind of who I am. But you don't have to be that person. I'm not going to look down on you if you aren't. So just remember that. I love you anyway. I love you even if you just love to paint little gaming minis and they're cool. That's it. Just do it. If it makes you happy, that's all that matters. Yeah, paint when you feel like it, Dammer. It's your hobby. I mean, I don't knit every day. I just started that hobby. I'm still not, I'm not going to do that every day. Do I paint? I don't even paint. Well, okay, I do paint every day because of this. But do I paint on my own projects every day? No, I don't. About the only thing I do every day right now is write. And that's because writing in some form or another I committed to every day. But that was a choice. So we've got our shadows in. I mixed this highlight. I made it Osirian Sand and Sun Yellow. I put a drop of each into 2 big blobs of this initial orange. So I've got this paler color now. And I'm going to see how that looks. Now this is going to result in not as bright of an orange. So what I will probably do after this is I will glaze with a brighter orange once I have my highlights and shadows set up. This will also help to blend in any brush strokes. Yeah, listen to Rhonda, Gibson. Also, Gibson, remember, just because you don't see improvement doesn't mean there's no improvement. We are the absolute worst people to judge our own work. Cool, Grey Wolf. Yeah, I like that one too. I like that particular... I used to use the blue liner and brown liner one, but the ultramarine plus walnut covers a little better, so if you're looking for a more solid black, it's cool. So all right, let's get some highlights down on this sucker. Again, I'm going to be going across. I'm going to kind of test. I need all my paint off my brush. No puddles, guys. So I unload my brush a lot. And it's going to kind of fade in a little bit. And I don't mind if it's a little brush strokey, like if I can see, and I definitely can see a little brush strokes here. Let's see if I can show you guys. See them? Yeah. So the brush strokes are showing up a little bit. But that's okay because I already know I'm going to glaze. I want to highlight and shade this sucker before I think about doing a brocade on it for at least a little bit. Because I don't want to have to try to shade and highlight that orange under freehand. That just doesn't work. Yeah, be careful with imposter syndrome. I actually ran into I ran into a psychologist and coach on YouTube the other day who made an excellent point. People call it, like, imposter syndrome has become this thing that people talk about, and they definitely should. But she points out that if you really, like if you're worrying about it, then you're not an imposter, is kind of her point. And that's totally true. Like, if you stop and think about it, it's like, if I am worrying that I might be an imposter, I'm not really an imposter, am I? So if that thought helps diffuse your feeling, I know that with the writing, I get a lot of that kind of imposter syndrome feeling, where I feel like I don't belong. So I guess her point was there's a difference between like the imposter syndrome that actually needs a psychologist and the one that we kind of all feel because we're unsure of ourselves. Yeah, Gibson. Lay off. Lay off yourself. Lay off yourself. Yourself is wonderful. Don't give it that much crap. Step back and just to try to enjoy it. I know that's hard. I know I hyperanalyze everything, and I do too. So all the feels there. Yeah, like the old, if you think you might be crazy, you're really not. Because you're self-aware enough to be to understand that you're having those thoughts, right? So yeah, much of what is labeled imposter syndrome is in fact just uncertainty about like whether we're good at a thing or whether we belong in a thing, or, you know, thinking we're not good enough to be doing a thing. Which is totally, you know, bull hooey most of the time. So I'm going to bring a little bit of highlights up here. I'm going to make my highlights a little stronger down near the bottom here. You can see those coming in. Now this is a very naturalistic feel. Hello, Bitman. Wow, thanks. 5 months. Thank you. Thank you for the resub. The Dark Bite. Oh, that does remind me of like little bugs. Yeah, it's the difference between fear and phobia. Exactly. Fear is natural, and phobia is more of an actual like mental issue, right? So, and we should all be happy that we're not having real imposter syndrome, because then we'd require doctors. So instead, we're just having a little bit of, you know, I don't know that I should even enter the competition. I don't know that I should even post my work on the Discord. I don't know that, you know, who am I to be, you know, even doing this, you know, that kind of thing. And that's a natural thing. Humans are unsure. That's why we like to get a validation from other people, because it kind of, in our head, it proves to us that we do belong here. But that's dangerous too, because you don't want to always be looking to other people for your validation. So it can help if you can just be happy with your hobby at whatever state it's in. And yeah, it's not necessary that you become the greatest painter unless you have set yourself to do that. Like if that's something that if learning new techniques and excelling at them is your jive, which is kind of my jive, to be honest, obviously where I am, look, then do it. Like then enter in and figure out, in that case, if you are one of those people, you shouldn't be down on yourself for being that person, but do think about like some of, figure out the way you learn best and look for an instructor that helps cater to that. Like, especially if you pay for coaching, kind of figure out like what's helpful and make sure to communicate to your instructor, your coach, you know, what's been really helpful to you. It'll help make things a little easier when you try to do that stuff. No trolls here, Bitman. I do have a troll from earlier. She's up on the shelf though, so I'm gonna like leave him up there. All right, so highlighting. And actually, let's just glaze so that you guys can kind of see how that brings it together. So let's grab our sunrise orange. Could also use my base color to do this, actually, since it's pretty vibrant, right? Our base color is pretty bright. There was not a pup date today. I have some fresh pictures, but they're pretty, like, boring puppy sleeping pictures. Let me see. I told Bridget I was going to bug her for new pictures this weekend. Let me see what I've got. So, Keyleth, doing her little pose, one paw out, one paw folded. And on the scale, we have Vex. I think Vex is going to be a pretty dark puppy. She's not getting as much light color as her brother is. So Vex, who is actually the tiniest girl right now. She's she weighs the least. She looks like she's Super Pudge, but she weighs the least. And then we have Pike. Pike is solid black girl. And she's got a little white chin. You can see her little white chin there. Little paws. And I think that Keyleth is the heaviest girl. Let me see. I have actually the latest weights. So the latest weights right now for everybody. Bridget weighs them every day and charts how much they're increasing by percent. So Pink Girl is right now at, and this is grams, by the way, 1241, and Keyleth is 1410, and Pike is 1455. So Lavender Girl, even though she looks black is slimming, even though she looks the skinniest, is actually the heaviest girl right now. And then you can see down here, Scanlan's the lightest boy. He's actually a little bit less than the heaviest girl, but otherwise the boys are generally heavier than the girls, and this is what happens in our breed. Yep. Yeah, Bridget is a data nerd, so it's fun. Yeah, Pink is all fluff. I call her Pink even though her name is Vex, but of course they've got critical role names. Vex, Keyleth, and Pike. Right now, I don't even, I'm waiting for them to look like puppies so that I can decide if I have a favorite, but I'm keeping a very open mind because temperament is king. Just going to put a little extra highlight. Before you put a glaze on, do make sure that you've got your highlights up solidly, and sometimes even a level up from where you might want them because your glaze is going to knock them down a bit. But you can always also re-highlight. Hello, Mad Hattress. You just missed a pup date. I'm getting a puppy toward the end of the summer, and they're a little over 2 weeks old right now. So I've been sharing adorable pictures, but the real adorable will be about 2 weeks from now. toward the end of July, guys, that's when the cute maxes out. In my opinion, the 4-week-old puppy is like the most adorbs. Like, they continue to be adorbs, but like there's just that point where everybody's got a favorite age for puppies, and mine is 4 weeks. Because they really look like puppies at that point, and they're starting to really hop around, and they're just adorable. All right, so we're going to make this glaze. It's really thin, you can see. Colored water. That's what you want for a glaze. You can always put more on, but you can't take it off, so go lightweight. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it over this entire cape. We've got shadows in, we've got highlights in. Putting the glaze over it is going to help to kind of restore a vibrant look to it, so it's more saturated, more bright. And it's also going to help blend this stuff in, blend all my brush strokes in. So in this case, what I did with this one, and you can do this with a smaller area, which is most 28ths. I wouldn't do it with this big purple part. I think I'd probably do more paint. So 2 ways to apply a glaze. One way is just like I just did. Take a super thin layer and coat it over the whole thing, then let it dry. But if you're working with a really big area, you might want to use extra paint, really slather it on, because that's going to keep it from drying around the edges while you fill everything in. Then come back with a brush that you've dried off a little bit, and you've cleaned and dried off, and kind of slurp off the excess fluid around the edges of things. You never want, unlike a wash, a glaze, you never want excess puddles, because they will dry with funky coffee stains. So like this guy here is drying, where you've got that dark rim around it. That's what you're going to get if you don't cover the whole surface evenly. And it's what you're going to get if you keep a puddle on where everything else dries, but then the puddle dries separately. You're going to get a horrible discoloration. You don't want that. So this has made it a little more vibrant. Notice it's faded in my highlights a bit. It's taken my brush strokes down a level, so that can be nice. But I think I'm going to table that. I actually think I might want to go a little bit more yellow with my highlight than I did here. So I'm always adjusting. But that's a pretty good start on that orange. I'm going to actually add a drop of sun yellow into my mixture for my highlighting. The other thing to note is that when you start highlighting with oranges and yellows, you think that they're really transparent colors because they don't cover worth anything. But then you try to layer with them, and it seems like you can see every dang brush stroke. And this is just the way that they are, these evil colors. They just do that. So I want to make my orange a little bit warmer. Putting more yellow in your orange highlights keeps you with a brighter orange. Essentially, it won't wash out your orange as much as using more white will. So if you do want a brighter orange, it can help to make your highlight just a little bit more yellow. Now it's much more orange. It's a little less washed out. So that's helpful. Let's try the front. I do need to thin this more, though. So you might need to thin your highlights more with orange and yellow than you think you do, because they look transparent, but when you start layering with them, they aren't as transparent as you think. So we're going to go up the front of this. Remember not to cover over all your midtone. You need to leave some of your midtone showing. Otherwise, you're just going to have highlights and shadows and it won't look orange anymore. This is something that's pretty common when people start layering. I am going to do a straight highlight line down the edges because there isn't much of a fold showing there. But it's very common when people start layering is that they put in their shadows, they put their highlights in, and then they've wiped out all their mid color. And then it doesn't look right. It looks really weird. So it doesn't look the color they want it to be. And they're not sure why. But it's because you've covered over all your midtones. So make sure that in between your highlight and your shadow, you keep that original orange color that you started with. Otherwise, it will cease to look that color. It will start looking some other color. Luckily, with glazing or just layering some in, hey, Pendrake, glad your internet is back. You missed the pup date, but that's okay. It wasn't totally thrilling. I did share how much they weigh, although I only shared it in grams. So for those people who are trying to figure it out in pounds, if you look up 1,400 grams and you convert that into pounds and ounces, you will have the weight of the skinniest puppy. And if you look up 1,765 grams or something like that, and convert that into pounds and ounces, you will have the weight of the heaviest puppy, who is Grog, of course. We knew Grog was going to be a bruiser right out of the womb. So now you can see the highlight a little bit more there. More broad toward the bottom and skinnier as it goes up, fading it in. Let's go up here and get these creases. It's okay when you've got a sharp crease like these to do more of a line highlight right up against that shadow if you want it to really show up. And doing that will make these, the places where the cloak is scrunching in will make it more visible, that detail. You can see it now more. $30 grams to the ounce. So I'm doing kind of a mix of my highlight color and my midtone color just to get kind of a lighter area here. Yeah, Crowley, have fun. And all the puppies were just under a pound, I believe, at birth. Or around there. Except Grog, who was heavier. Because Grog is just a bruiser. But yeah, right now I'm just like, I can't wait to see their little personalities. I can't wait to see who's who. I want to get it and start getting an idea of who's who among the girls. And I'm so impatient. I'm like, grow faster, puppies! And then I'm going to be like, grow slower, puppies! When I'm desperately trying to get all my puppy supplies organized to get our puppy home. So I'll put more of a highlight on the underside of a fold, because it's where that fold pops out into the light that you're going to see a little bit more. So let's grab our highlight here. And I'll emphasize that lower fold. But I'm doing a general highlight over most of the shoulder here. You can see it there. We'll go a few minutes past because we were late today. Oh wait, we've got a Luca, don't we? Do we have a Luca today? Is the Alpaca Nation looming? Going up the arm there with that. No Luca, no rush? All right. Luca has abandoned us. Or is he going on and he's just not here yet? Sorry, Trash. There are many times, Trash, that I would like to kick Twitch. For sure. So I'm using my highlight color here to like kind of trim just some blurfed lining I did where the lining is a little too wide. So my highlight color has white in it because I added a little bit of Osirian sand, right? So because of that, it covers better I can essentially cover up that blorf with my highlight color and then just put my midtone right over the top, and it will fix the blorf. So if you find an accidental blorf and you're working with a more transparent color like orange, that is one way to fix a blorf. Yep, he got a bronze medal at the World Expo, Twisted Noma, which is huge. Huge! There were over 4,000 entries at the World Expo this year, by the way, in the Netherlands. Which, considering there's still a lot of like kind of COVID stuff in place, is really good. Just to give you guys, like, I think the biggest World Expos in the past have had over 10,000 entries. Oh, he's not feeling well. Got it. Poor Luca. I hope he didn't get the plague. Alrighty, so got that nice shoulder going on there now. Got some decent orange highlighting going on. I haven't done the hat here, so I'll do it. Bring in some highlights up near the gem on either side of it. So just a little bit. You can see that highlight right there. And we'll get it on the other side. That's just where the light would be shining, so that's where I'm concentrating my highlight. There. There we go. So that's looking pretty decent. We got more or less. We don't have our second highlight on here yet. I'm going to bring up this orange another level, but we can see where our highlights and shadows are starting to read, right? So since I started with a fairly dark orange, I'm not going to do more than one layer of shading for the most part, unless I decide that one more layer on some of these tighter folds would be beneficial. But a lot of this area where the folds are very shallow and they don't really leave a shadow there, I don't need more. So that's kind of where I think I am right now. I will put another layer of highlight on. You can get highlight one of two ways. You can make your shadows darker or your highlights higher. But I like the orange so far. I think bringing it up one more level will be good. Then I can really question whether I want to do the brocade on top of it or I don't. Now that I'm looking at it, it's like I might do a panel here and I might do a panel here, but I'll have to think about it. It'll totally screw up my shading and highlighting because my shading and highlighting isn't real dramatic right now. So I'm trying to figure out if I want to do it or not. Alrighty, well let's do, I want to fudge in some of this shading a little bit back here. It got a little strong. And I'm just going to paint my midtone over it to blend it in a little bit better. There are times when I will just not even thin my midtone, and I'll just paint it right over a shadow that's overwhelming, essentially giving it like a 3 or 4 times as thick glaze. When I know that my base color is somewhat transparent, it's essentially just a really thick glaze, and I know that I want that because I can see too much of this shadow right now. So I know automatically that I want a much heavier handed thing than a very, very light glaze. So if you've already glazed a surface and it's not giving you the results you want and you feel like you are going to have to add 60 zillion layers, just take your base coat and like make sure it's a thin to slightly, as mine always is. Mine's always at least, at this point, it's a 2 to 1. And just paint that right over it then. Because if your base coat is somewhat transparent already, if it's a little bit see-through, it's just going to be like a really heavy glaze. And then you can get that blend to work with fewer layers. I don't recommend it out the gate when you're learning to use glazes. I always recommend starting real subtle and going and just building up layers. But if you are getting frustrated, then you can go with a heavier hammer on it. All right, folks, I think that's where we'll end. I don't have time really to do another stage of highlight on my orange without going very over time. Tomorrow, we are going to be working on Kitty. Kitty is really coming along. We're pretty much the gold. Doing the gold on Kitty. I still have some metal. Like, I still want to work a bit on the silver. I still feel like it could use some darker shadows, just a little bit. But right now, it's looking pretty good. I do want to make the ball of yarn orange as well. And then we can highlight the individual strands a bit. It'll be fun. But we need to work on this, and I need to do the blade in silver, and I think I'm going to make it with a purple fade. Either a purple fade here or purple fade out there. I haven't decided yet. We also need to get our purple mixed up anyway because we need to highlight our shield here. But Kitty is looking good. Like, pretty happy. Pretty happy with Kitty. Like, the helmet looks great. Like, from this angle, I really like the helmet. And the back of the arm's looking pretty good, too. My gut says I need a little bit darker. I'm trying really hard not to get this NMM too dark because I do want him to be a very shiny Kitty. But yeah, so Kitty's looking pretty cute. Pretty cute. This might be one I sell too. I'm going to put up a couple models for sale on my Patreon soon. I just need to figure out if I'm going to put some extra basing on them. But Kitty might be one. He's almost done. And I think he's like a fun piece too. So yes, there's all my places you can find me. I do offer my models for sale. They go to my patrons first. If anything doesn't sell to the patrons, then I'd post it up publicly. But so far, everything is sold to patrons. So, and all my patrons get a chance to bid. It's an open auction. I usually start things at kind of a bargain price because you guys all support me so much already. But yeah. So that's what we'll work on tomorrow, guys. We'll get the orange done on here, and I think we'll get the gold kind of blocked in, and we'll maybe work on doing the blade, finishing up the blade. Yeah, Kodiak. I usually I'll put them up for like $100-$150 starting bid. And anybody on my Patreon can bid. So it'll go up, you'll get a post, like just a normal post to the whole Patreon. And then it's just all public bidding. So you always know what you're in for. It's not that you bid and don't know, what it goes for until the end. You see it, so you know. But yeah, cool. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in today. We're very purple and orange. I hadn't realized that we have 2 purple and orange models in... Yeah, well, just so you know, you're new to the Patreon. So, like, yeah, it goes up. Those are my starting. Just so you know, by the way, my commission price is $250 per model. So it is a substantial discount off of what I would charge for commission. But at any rate, yeah, I didn't realize until I realized that they were right next to each other, but that we have purple and orange. Apparently I'm on a purple and orange kick, guys, and I've got to get out of the purple and orange. We'll have to do something else. I guess the Centaur is different. Yeah, no problem. Yeah. And I mean, there's no rush either. I do put these things up every once in a while. So, alrighty. Tune in tomorrow for Kitty painting. But yes, thank you, everybody. I hope you had a good time today. We talked about a lot. We talked about highlighting and shading orange. We talked about tactics using the oxides. We talked about why you should not expect perfection and or improvement from yourself, and why you shouldn't be so hard on yourself as a painter, and how your brain, you should learn to play to your brain's strengths and not kick yourself for some thing that you think you should be doing. We talked about all that today. So if you tuned in late, catch the VOD. Otherwise, yeah, Elf is different for sure. So otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow. I hope you all have a wonderful Wednesday. All right, guys, see you later.